All right, so there's some big changes at the SBA, and my guest today, we're going to talk about what those changes are, how it affects him and the bank that he works for, and the overall industry and small business owners across the country. So, my guest today is Chris Tomlinson. He is the head director of the SBA division at Optimum Bank. Chris, appreciate you joining me today.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot, going on, and I know you guys are a growing bank, have such a good reputation, and I wanted to talk to you about the rule changes of now legal permanent residents being excluded from the 7A and 504 plans, and we'll get into the details and if I even have that correct. And it starts on March 1st, which was yesterday, so it's really a timely matter that's affecting a lot of the SBA lenders across the country. So first, give me just fill in kind of the blanks on your background and your position with Optimum Bank.
So basically, I joined them in 2023. They wanted to build out an SBA division from scratch. So they hired me to build it from scratch, and it was at a time rates were at 11 and a half. Everything was kind of changing, with SBA. And so I wanted to make sure that, between the CEO and I and the chairman, Moshe Gubin, we wanted to make sure we built, something that wasn't out there and something that was safe, sound, solid, and mainly customer centric was the biggest piece because we wanted to make sure that we built something out the right way from the ground up. So I've been, all that said, with with all the stuff that we're facing with the high rates and everything like that, I felt like if while we were building this out from scratch at 11 and a half, anything that we kind of, as rates started going down, we were kind of building it at the peak of the rate. So like anything that's going to go down is just really going to help our portfolio that we're building. And it's just going to make it look even better than what it is. But anyway, so we started out and we wanted to make sure that we got our brand out there and started build. I wanted to build out the foundation first. So I
Hmm.
wanted to make sure we were compliant and we built the foundation of credit operations, all that first before we started building out the sales piece to it because we wanted to make sure we had the foundation and we were in good standing with the SBA right out the gate. So there was a lot of changes during the time as I was building this out that were with the SBA. I just kind of used the old SBA as the more footprint to kind of make sure that we were doing things more safe with us being new and put us in a better position. Anyway, so we started building all that out. And then about 24 of last year, February, we became a preferred lender with the
Okay.
SBA. So
And
we did 18 million in 2024 and 25. We did about 37 million.
okay, so you about doubled then in back-to-back years there, 24 and then 25. So really good growth. And now you guys,
Yep.
with the rates coming down, it's giving you maybe some more advantages or maybe things that you're able to talk to customers about. So with, you being at that kind of operating at both of the production and compliance
Yep.
level, now how do you balance things with your growth objectives and now, the regulatory issues and discipline in today's environment?
I just make sure that I'm taking the right, I'm going through the right processes to make sure that we're taking care of the client, but we're also protecting the bank at the same time. So I like to make sure, and if there's a no, what we like to do when a deal comes in, we'd rather tell them no and yes fast than we would rather just to waste their time through the process and make them frustrated. So we just like to make sure we get them with our team, and we just make sure that what the deals that are coming in that we're following and SBA guidelines, SBA rules. But we are all big about the customer. We like to make sure that they fully understand what they're getting into, and they fully understand what the process looks like every step of the way. So when a
Mhm.
borrower comes and reaches out to borrow SBA, I make sure that they fully understand what they're getting into and have a call, and then it helps with the process.
Is there, I mean, the broad range of industries, any certain ones that you can pick out that you like to focus on or that you have been helping the most, and any sort of, either trend or just what you like to kind of think that you guys provide an advantage to with almost consulting them with getting the appropriate financing?
Yeah, I would say it's more like business acquisitions and then like the service industry. I think the HVAC, plumbing, electrical, the construction arena. I think that those businesses have the business acquisitions we have. I think we've gotten really good at,
Hmm.
and we've gotten good at even from the business broker level to the borrower level, as far as being able to coach not only the broker but the client on how the process looks to buy that business.
So let's jump into then the category of the topic of at hand, right? As
Yep.
far as what went into effect on March 1st, and what are your initial, maybe walk me through backtrack a little bit when you first heard about this new change that the SBA implemented of legal permanent residence. Before it was X percentage, now it's 0% ownership. Walk me through what you first thought about it, and then now that it's being implemented, given or on March 1st.
Yeah, so when I first heard about it, I knew the one industry I think it's going to hurt the most that I've noticed is that on the franchise industry, because that's really big, especially in the legal permanent resident category. You see a lot of that in that area. So I
Hmm.
do think that's where, because we do a mix of that. We do a lot of franchises too, and
Okay.
so I think that's where I see from even business acquisitions to even startups in those arenas. I think those are going to see definitely an impact. So you'll probably start to see some other private lenders out there that'll offset that. But that's what I've noticed, that right off the bat when they were coming out with that new regulation, that would be the biggest impact.
Okay. And so now, how with, I mean, it just going into effect yesterday, but in the last week or so, what have you noticed? Have you had any people that you had to turn away potentially, because they wouldn't meet the new criteria or new rules? And then how do you see this kind of playing out?
Yeah, so I had actually a deal that I was looking at that was one, for example, and they couldn't move forward, so they had to find alternate financing outside of SBA to be able to buy that business they were looking at purchasing. So I've had one that it's affected, but I will tell you, I haven't seen it slow down our volume that we're
Good.
seeing right now.
Okay.
Fourth quarter, I felt like it started to pick up a lot, that we've been seeing a better quality of SBA business at the end of fourth, going into first. And I feel like it's not really slowed down and made a real huge impact on our volume, but it
Hmm.
has. I have seen cases where I've been on the phone with, where I've had to kind of just tell them they did not qualify based on those reasons. So there are impacts.
Okay, and I don't have it in front of me, but there's probably a percentage of SBA loans that that were provided to people that would fit into this category, that into these um, categories of green card holders, legal permanent residents that they would not now be able to get. Is there any certain numbers or percentage of SBA loans that you're aware of, or
Not that I'm aware of. I
okay,
haven't heard any like the certain percentages of that yet. That data hasn't really come out, but I bet you'll see that release soon.
yeah,
What kind of impact it's going to make percentage wise? Because
yeah.
as time goes on and they see the impacts, I think you'll start. Then that's when you'll see, that kind of data saying, hey, the portfolio of the SBA is this, and this is how much percentage is lost from it.
Now, do you think this is because there's been a lot of pushback and not necessarily,
Right.
from you or any, there's been pushback that I've seen online. There's now even a petition from, um, kind of prominent SBA BDOs out there that started it. And now they're trying to get signatures to have them, repeal this or reverse this rule. Do you think that it is like a hard stance that they're testing it out and then possible that they'll reverse it the near future?
It's hard to tell because I think that the biggest thing I've noticed is that they're kind of all, they're actually evaluating the portfolio at the SBA.
Hmm.
And I bet with the fraud they've seen and some of the things, the loans going bad with the SBA, I think they're kind of just evaluating the portfolio to see if this one in particular procedure update would make any changes to that based on those changes.
Do you see now any other changes that the SBA has either talked about or is coming, through with?
So March 1st, they also implemented where no longer the SBA will be doing the SBS score, which is now being eliminated by that starting March 1st. So
So talk about
before
what that score is for those
yeah,
who may not know, and then
yeah, yeah, I'll go into detail. So basically, they started out with 500,000 and under. They were doing an SBS score, and that really that score with the SBA basically consists of like it's based on a lot of factors that went into that scoring, but that scoring was on a level between 165 and say like 200, and if they met that criteria, then a lot of the banks under those loans that are 500,000, they had a scoring system, and at the scoring system with the SBA, it would qualify you to get that 500,000 based on the scoring. But now they started out with they were going to still keep the scoring, and then they were going to do more further underwriting and more cash flow analysis on that scoring. And now they just eliminated the scoring as a whole, where it's more heavily in the underwriting piece to make sure the quality's there to be able to underwrite the deal better for better portfolio of the SBA. So that's what it comes down to. Yeah.
I mean, to me, from someone who does not process SBA loans, who's not in
Yeah.
the inside like yourself, it
Yeah.
almost seems like the score would actually help in underwriting. But you're saying that they're going to add these other things, more maybe, even AI or whatever into the underwriting, right? That's going to be a little bit
Right.
different to make up and maybe exceed to help underwrite and have better performing portfolio overall.
Well, I'll give you actually an example. So, like, say a deal comes through and the scoring's there, right? But then we go into it and we start underwriting that deal behind the scoring, and the score might have been there. They might had a credit score personally, which drove that number up to be higher. But then what'll happen is if once I went into that file and started underwriting the file from like cash flow, and just underwriting the whole credit of the profile, I'd find out that they couldn't afford the debt for the business that they were actually applying for. So it's like once I dug into it and underwrote it more deeper,
Hmm.
instead of moving the file over just based off a score, I realized that the file couldn't you couldn't move forward because the business couldn't actually afford the debt they were taking out.
So will then you will get that information sooner then in the process, besides, so the score's not there, so you're going to get that basically first, right? Or up front.
We'll underwrite it. So instead of it scoring and say, okay, this scored a 200, let's move forward. Let's move this to approved.
Hmm.
Then now it's going to be more like let's do an analysis on it, a much further, deeper underwriting to see if this qualifies for SBA and for the bank's risk appetite on the debt service coverage. Yeah.
And is that to each lender's satisfaction? Like you're creating this underwriting process internally. It's not the SBA is
Yeah.
giving you some sort of, okay, got it.
Yeah,
Okay. It's
correct.
allowed
We're
there.
following the eligibility with the SBA because they want us to be doing more deeper on the underwriting piece to be able to, because it's coming instruction that's saying, okay, we want the banks and the SBA to be on the same page. We want you to be able to make sure you're doing the proper due diligence with the underwriting to make sure you're giving out the SBA to the person that can afford it.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, and I know they've made some adjustments with, the new SBA administrator. There was lots of talk about default rates increasing,
Yep.
whatever the tranches were from years before, but they were elevated, and they were trying to get that down overall. So some of these are moves to reduce that default rate. Um,
Yeah.
whether or not it works, we'll see. So talk to me then with those changes now, those are two pretty
Yeah.
big changes. What, from your perspective and how you're handling things, are you doing to then internally make sure you're, one, in compliance, but that everything kind of works in your favor and how you're working within these, new rules?
I'll tell you, we're doing like a pre-approval with the borrower at the beginning. So we're making sure we're kind of like, running through like a pre-underwriting format before we even go to term sheet with the borrower, so that make sure that they properly qualify, and that when we give them a term sheet, we've already kind of vetted the deal through our credit team, so we can make sure that the borrower's time is well spent with us and they fully understand what they're getting into, and the bank does too. So we're definitely putting measures in the kind of, instead of us being a scoring system, we're
Hmm.
kind of using that scoring system as, we're going to score it with internal proper procedures we put in place.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. And then is there any other ways that you kind of lenders and even brokers are kind of rethinking the deal structure or anything else in light of this kind of in enhanced scrutiny, if you will, but at least analysis, yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting with the brokers, and actually we're meeting together and kind of talking through how they talk with their customers. And I'm even helping with the brokers on some of the things that they need to maybe implement in their process of better qualifying the deals that they send over to us at the bank.
Mm. Now, yeah, I would guess all those is kind of like on a checklist, right? For a broker, it's like, all right, so
Yep.
whatever Optimum needs is the checklist before they come over to you.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
And I send them that, and like, and maybe, it might be a first time broker that I'm meeting, and they're not familiar with the checklist or anything of that nature. So what we do is I get them with our team, my whole team and my staff, to kind of go over what we're asking for, why we need it, the importance of it, and so they fully understand how to be able to consult their borrowers and their customers a lot better on sending over better quality to the bank and for them. So
Okay. And then there were some limit changes on the 7A, Chris, that were recently they kind of went from 500, I think it was down to 350. Tell me about that really quick.
yeah, so the 500 and 350 basically was, there was no fees on 500 and under, and then there was no fees in 350 and under, and then that just actually just went away, and there's fees on all the SBA loans now going forward. So
Okay.
that was one of the changes. The other change they made is they were doing the scoring system, which is the SBS scoring. They were going 500, then they went down to 350, and as of March 1st, that was being eliminated as a whole.
And then just to get back and kind of wrap it up on the legal permanent resident
Yeah.
changes, what other specifics then? Because I had a couple here where it's
Yeah.
like, ownership and eligibility and so forth that you want to mention.
Yeah. So basically the business, I mean, they must be 100% owned, 100% owned directly and indirectly by a U.S. citizen or a U.S. national. Must be the legal permanent resident green card holders are not eligible. The principal residence of all owners must be in the United States. An eligible person may provide limited guarantee or support to pledge any collateral or anything like that held required collateral, but they cannot be an owner or have any ownership. Business may not employ undocumented aliens that are in the U.S. illegally.
So, what else is kind of on your plate that you're working on that you want to talk to people, just about Optimum, maybe the rest of the year?
Yeah, so no, so we got a great thing going on. I mean, going into this year, we hired our first salesperson, Nicholas Giaquinto, as our business development officer there in South Florida in the Hollywood area. And we just keep growing our team. We keep growing SBA. We've seen a lot of traction of business going into 2026 that we're excited about. And I feel like we got a great brand. I report to the CEO of the bank, and we have a chairman that really cares about growth, and our CEO. So I feel like we've got something that separates ourselves because we like to give them the white glove experience and not really give them the technology. We just like to be hands on with them and just really they fully understand the SBA, how it can really help them and what they're trying to do. So I really think, and we just like the true education on what they're getting into is really the key of it, and the expectations and everything through the SBA process. So I feel like we have a lot of great things going into 26 that I would love to be able to talk with people and see how I can help them. If they're a broker or they're a borrower trying to borrow SBA, I would love to speak with them and see how I can help them.
All right. Well, Chris, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate your
Same
time.
here. Yeah.
Yeah. This topic is not going to go away for a little bit, so I'm going to check back in with you down the
Yeah.
line. So, I appreciate everything you guys do, and I look forward to seeing your growth.
I appreciate it. And I'll keep you posted if anything changes on the percentages or anything at that. I'll keep you updated on that as well. So, but thank you for having me on today.
All right. Absolutely, Chris. So until next time, we'll see you, and everyone take care.